What happened next is a story oft-repeated and repeatedly forgotten. A burning bush, a stick turned to a snake, a leprous hand, a lot of back and forth, and 10 plagues later, Israel finally tasted freedom when Moses led them out of Egypt. Years after, some would say they could still smell the salt mist swirling violently up from the parted Red Sea, could still see Miriam leading the women in a dance with their timbrels after the waters closed in on the chariots, could still taste the provision of manna and quail in the wilderness. But the memories faded, and we soon forgot all that God had done. We lost faith, lost direction, and wandered around complaining for years. To get us back on track, God gave 613 commandments, the law, a cartography for how to move safely and healthily through a savage and sick world, a guidebook for worship and holidays, all of which were kind of a sensory overload. Incense in the tabernacle, the smoke of burnt offerings on the altar, the blasting of trumpets, the eating of bitter herbs in the Passover feast. After many wars and heartaches and miracles, God's people at last made their home in a land flowing with milk and honey. A boy who spent his days in the field with sheep played the harp before a brooding king. He later exchanged the peat animal stink in his hair for the cinnamon and cassia aromas of the holy anointing oil poured over his head when he himself became king. It was later foretold that a very special king would come from the line of David who would save us from our oppressors once and for all. People took this very literally, which led to a lot of confusion, and in general, having earthly kings was a headache that ended in disaster. Remember those inimitable luminous eyes we talked about at the beginning? The ones that can wander? They did. Under a series of bad kings, they drifted to and worshipped false gods of the surrounding nations, Baal, Ashtoreth, Dagon, Marduk. They tempt us still to this day, we just call them by different names. This led to a new kind of sensory overload, the cup of staggering, the stench of death and the massacre of Jerusalem, smoke rising from the ashes of Solomon's temple destroyed, the wailing of God's people as the Babylonians carried us into exile, cut off from our land of promise. On the banks of the Euphrates River, we were so homesick that not even singing songs from the old country could lift up our spirits anymore. So we hung up our instruments in the willow trees, heaped ashes on our heads, and wept. Our captors wanted to torment us, so they taunted, their acidic hot breath like toxic vapor demanding in our ears, "Show a little mirth. Come on, sing us one of the songs of Zion." How could we sing the Lord's song in a foreign land? Our mouths went dry, our souls went dry. Where was he? This supposed conquering king from the line of David. How long would he hide his face? This rod of Jesse, this key of David. Who would pay our ransom?